I'm Bree Luck, and you are listening to the Pause to Go podcast, where we explore the process of turning life's transitions into stellar transformations. You can expect interviews with experts, straight talk with remarkable humans, and conversations about making the most of every phase of life. Because when we approach life's stickiest spots with curiosity, support, and a little bit of inspiration, anything is possible. So whether you're on your way to work or settling in with your favorite beverage, together we can pause to go. As a solopreneur, I really like the flexibility to work from pretty much anywhere, so I'm happy to head down to Code-Based Co-working, where I can enjoy the company of others while I tackle my to-do list. Also, they have a state-of-the-art, consumer-friendly podcasting studio that is frankly my home away from home. So head over to Code-Based Co-working, check it out, and when you do, tell them that Bree sent you. Over the last month, we've heard from all sorts of experts about perimenopause and menopause. Doctors, healers, cultural experts, coaches, sex coaches. It's been a gift to hear from folks who are so well-versed in this time of life. But now we're going to turn to a different sort of expert. These are behind closed doors conversations with friends talking about their very different experiences of perimenopause and menopause. Today, I'm speaking with my dear, dear friend, Jennifer Hoyt Tidwell. Those of you who have listened to multiple episodes will recognize a story that comes up as I truly come clean about my deep, deep resistance to admitting that I might be perimenopausal. I love Jennifer. She really has a beautiful and grounding perspective on her own perimenopausal process. And I hope you enjoy this Friends episode of Pause to Go with Jennifer Hoyt Tidwell. Jen, the first question that I have for you is, how old are you now? And where are you in your perimenopause journey?
I am 49 years old, which I still can't believe because I just always feel permanently like 13. But I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm literally technically in perimenopause. Being 49, you are considered perimenopausal. Symptomatically, I'm unsure. My periods are definitely getting lighter. They're regular, but they're only 2 days long now and very light. And I'm very lucky in that way. I don't have hot flashes at this point. I would say like fuzziness of word recall is probably related to that. That's maddening. That is something because I have a history of trauma that sort of came up and caused me major memory lapses, was like a little hard to sort out from perimenopause in the last 3 years ago when I had kind of a dip in my mental health. But I do think it's still, even though I sorted that out, I do notice that it's harder for me to recall words. And as a writer and, a word person, it's very hard to accept that sometimes. But I do hear that after menopause, a lot of those symptoms resolve. And so I'm just kind of holding on.
I've heard that too. And I had a similar issue. It's hard to know what is perimenopause and what is something else. Because as you know, Jen and I have been friends for a long, long time.
So long. 2004?
2003. 2003. Yeah. And we're very close in age. I'm 48, she's 49. And so you've really been, I've always seen you as being kind of a sister. As like, oh, what's Jen going through? Oh, I'm probably going to be going through that too. And
because I'm a year older.
Because you're a year older. And
it works that way, but yeah. And we both suffer from perfectionism and people pleasing. We're recovering from those, I should say. We're survivors.
Recovering people pleasers. Yes.
Yes. Seek to anger everyone.
That's how we know we've hit perimenopause.
That's right.
But I had Lyme disease, and I also had a lot of fuzzy, foggy-headed, loss of word recall, losing my keys everywhere that I went, that kind of thing. And now that I look back on it, because I was diagnosed with Lyme when I was around 40. Now that I look back on it, I think, could that have actually been an early symptom of perimenopause that was influenced by Lyme, or that they both fed each other, fueled each other, which is similar to having some other mental health issues or other medical issues.
And also just personal circumstances. Like I feel like there was this kind of perfect storm where my body I was having all sorts of joint problems and worried that I had an autoimmune disease and trying to sort that out. And while also being depressed, while also, like being perimenopausal. And so it's just like, what is going on? And then no one really can help you. Even my psychiatrist is like, well, we're just going to try some things and just sort of, I've been very lucky to be on the same medication for 7 years with, basically I lucked out, very successful. And then we needed to add something. And that seemed to actually, like, as far as I know, except when I'm PMSing, where I get really irritable now, I'm in a really good place mentally, emotionally, and just in my life circumstantially. So I'm very grateful for that.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming. It's been 49 years.
Well, you've earned it. Thank
you. I feel that way.
So I told you that I was going to tell you this story. I've been telling everyone who has come on to the podcast so far, I've told them this story, whether we recorded it or just in conversation before it. So I'm so glad that you've come on to talk, because now I can tell you the story. Mm-hmm. So 3 years ago, when you were feeling that foggy headedness and some emotional strife, I guess.
I cried with you at a cafe, I think.
That's right. Yeah, we cried in a cafe. Not unusual. Not an unusual occurrence. But I was also in a really hard place. I was in a job where I was people pleasing and perfectionisticking all over the place, and was really struggling and was trying to find an exit strategy that didn't disappoint anyone.
Right. God forbid someone give us some disappointment.
And so we met with each other both in this kind of dark place, sad place, crying in a cafe. And you said, I want to give you this book. And who was the author of that?
I'm looking it up because I can't remember, because I'm perimenopausal. Look, guys, it's happening in real time.
It's real.
That's exciting. It's called The Flash Count Diary by Darcy Stenke, Steinke. And it is endorsed by the wonderful Maggie Nelson, who says, this elegant, wise, deeply moving book is an instant classic. The New York Times raved about it. So there you go. I felt that way about it.
So you very, very kindly gave me.
Forced it on you. Yeah.
Gave me. You were so generous. And as I sipped on my flat white, over caffeinating myself even more, you pushed this small book across the table to me and said, I really think you should read this. It's really helping me. Mm-hmm. It helps me to understand what I'm going through. And I think you should read it. It's about perimenopause. And I remember having this wave of fear and anger and frustration and sadness all at once about this little book. And I smiled and I said, thank you.
I had no idea that all that was going on.
Thank you, my dear friend. And it was
You were trying to please me, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Because I love you and you are a person I admire and cherish so deeply. I took the book, we cried, and then I left and I went straight to the book recycle center and dropped off the book.
Oh my God, that's funny.
And Jen, I have to tell you that it's, first of all, I'm going to now buy the book for myself.
Good. Give the author some money.
And I actually want to thank you because, first of all, it was so kind of you to give me the book that I gave away. But also, what it has done is, because I've thought about it, of course, at least 100 times since that day. You never know
what's going on inside.
You never know. And it really awakened me to my internalized ageism and misogyny that were deeply, deeply ingrained. And without that small but very intense moment, I don't know that I would have become aware of it in the same way.
Were you like inside going, Jennifer thinks I'm old. She's calling me old and dried up.
I will say it was a little different from that for me. It was, I'm not ready for us to be that old. I think we're just depressed, Jennifer. I think we're just depressed.
Well, and that could be, but after talking to doctors, it's like, there's not really a moment where you're perimenopausal. It's like, you just are. As soon as something starts changing, it's changing. Like at 40, your eyes change. It's a slow thing in your 40s of becoming perimenopausal. And then they just sort of have an age that you are, like whether or not you would want to agree with that or not. Doctors are like, yeah, we can look at your cycle. We can see your hormone levels and we can tell when you get a blood test.
Yeah, basically what I'm hearing is, unless you've already been through menopause, if you are Gen X and you have ovaries, you are in perimenopause.
Right. That's my understanding from my research and talking to my doctors.
Yeah. I also found it was interesting that it was absolutely fine and acceptable to be depressed, but it wasn't fine and acceptable to be a woman. That's what killed me.
Yeah. There's some association of negativity with menopause for obvious reasons. I mean, the millennia of the crone coming and like the sexless masculine transition. And that's what I like about the Flash Count Diary is she's just like examining it in that history of misogynism and just like anti-feminism. Like as soon as a woman shows any masculine characteristics, she's invisible or not even masculine, but no longer registers as a young woman. She becomes invisible. But then there's all this freedom and delight in that. If you don't deny it, like you're like, yeah, people are definitely looking at my daughter more than me.
Oh,
do
yeah.
I like it when they call us sisters? Hell yeah, I do. I am still vain. I still henna my hair. I'm not ready to go gray, even though I'm totally gray underneath my henna. But I don't worry about that. I just know that the time is going to come where I'm going to look in the mirror and go, all right, I'm ready to go gray. It's just not now.
Well, I hear that. And there is a sense of personal agency, right? I do love this idea of invisibility as a superpower that you can use to your advantage.
As an artist, it is invaluable. The more you stop being regarded and objectified, if you happen to be a feminine person, like I think I read as feminine. I've been told that, even though I'm queer. And so I know that that's been a factor in how men have treated me. And I feel like that's less and less the case, that I'm seen that way. Also, as a new classroom teacher, as I'm aging, I'm really interested in not being center stage. And I mean, it takes some getting used to as a former actor, but I shouldn't say former. I'm always open. You can reach me at, but I'm really relishing this period of stepping back and being more invisible. I mean, it's also why a lot of us transition into directing, because there's a lot of power and agency in that. It's just higher perspective in some ways.
And also not having to be selected or chosen, being the one who does the choosing and the selecting can be really, well, it is empowering. That's just what it is. So you've started a whole new career in this phase.
Yeah, I lost all of my work during the lockdown because I had all these teaching artist bookings, and that's what I had been doing, traveling around the state and doing kind of residencies with kids of all ages and universities and community colleges. And then, of course, everything disappeared. And I didn't freak out, fortunately, because I had recently gotten into a very, very happy and satisfying new relationship. And she was completely supportive of me finding my way. And, fortunately, we had the unemployment payments coming in, so I wasn't financially strapped. And so I this hilarious period where I worked with my friend Jess, who served as a coach, and we went deep into the subconscious for quite a while, which I loved. And then I just felt free to try a bunch of things to put myself in the world safely. But I worked for the Census Bureau. I worked for DoorDash. I worked as an election official. I was just in all these different realms as a public official. And I've never done anything like that. And it was kind of humbling too, realizing that I've been in so many different levels of perceived power, And so this was like being totally anonymous in a town where I haven't been anonymous, but because I'm entering realms where people don't know me. And then the Census Bureau job sent me, because Charlottesville wrapped up its work, the census sent me to my hometown, which is hours away. And I would get paid to drive around the rural roads where I grew up, the country roads, and revisit my childhood. It was super powerful. And then this opportunity to become a middle school teacher at a Montessori school dropped in my lap. I didn't have aspirations to be a full-time classroom teacher, especially, I just didn't think I had what it took to do it in public school. But because Montessori is so different as far as like giving opportunities for the whole child to develop at that age, and it's being a private or independent school, there's just a lot more freedom with the curriculum and everything. I was intrigued, and so I jumped in, and it was, God, the first year was hard. Oh my Lord. Half the students on Zoom, half the students in the classroom, and then they would just flip every week. And having to communicate with a mask on, I became catatonic by the winter. I mean, I would like come home and it didn't feel good. But at the same time, there was something so powerful in stepping back and in the spiritual journey of walking, just like I'm going through this transition. These kids are like they're 12 and 13. And what an honor to walk with them and like try to make the environment and their journey as I wish it had been for me. The opportunities, like they're working a farm, they're running businesses, and in addition to their academic stuff, it's been really powerful, and it required such a deepening of my compassion, because it's just like sensorily a bunch of kids talking constantly at you, or acting up, and we have a good amount of kids with ADHD, and it's been such a that expression of building an airplane in midair kind of feeling. But I have this amazing co-teacher who has just constantly reinforcing. She's like, you're doing great. This is the way it goes. This is how it is. And you're starting teaching under the hardest possible conditions. And so you've got to be more gentle on yourself and not. She was just like, do less, Jennifer, do less. So I started doing that, and I'm loving it and waking up with purpose in a way that I never have before. So yeah, I'm glad I took the leap.
Well, that waking up with purpose is key, because when we feel like we're moving towards something that we believe in, and moving in something that we believe in, right? Not just a striving for, but like the steps that I'm taking now all feel right. Like it's toward a good that I can really get behind.
Yeah, it is. It is. I do feel that. And I'm also, I'm giving myself a few years because I have always kind of identified in my soul as an artist, I guess. And, my circle of friends and cohorts also, a lot of us also do. And, and so it's been a real like challenge for my ego in some ways, but also I just need to pay attention to how I manage the overwhelm. This year I started with way more confidence, and that's and like showing my true sense of humor and my ease, and it's been a lot better, but I still recognize that it is certain kinds of people can handle teaching middle school, and I hope that I am one of those people, because this transition is exactly like the 0 to 3 age. There's no other time when the brain changes that much, just structurally. But menopause is another one. For women, it's just another huge brain structural change, I think.
That's right. It is another huge brain change, the neurological restructuring that happens with the hormone surges and changes. It does mirror particularly that puberty time.
You and I have children. As we are of a certain age, those of us who have kids, it often lines up where the kids are going through puberty as you're 40 and you've got your own life changes beginning. It's funny timing.
Jennifer and I both have daughters, and there is a real beauty. It's painful, but it's also beautiful that as my daughters are really becoming and are curious about being sexual beings, they're really awakening to those parts of their lives. I wouldn't say that I'm letting go of that part of my life at all. I'm not. It's more like, oh, I'm looking at it from a different perspective now.
We value those things differently, I think. Like, I do not agree that the woman's libido, peaks at a certain age. Not at all. But I do think that you're putting emphasis on sex in your life can change. Like, it definitely did for me, ebbing and flowing depending on what relationship I was in and where I was with everything else in my life. But it's very important for a long time.
And you have just started a new relationship in this time. Well, it's not new now.
It's a little over a year and a half.
What has that been like in this point in your life? Because I've been married for forever. So I'm really just curious, like, what is different about starting a relationship now in this perimenopausal time as opposed to, say, in your 20s or 30s?
Well, I was in a long-term relationship from the time I was with my husband from the time I was 22, until he died when I was 33. And he was only the second person I'd been with. So I had very little sexual experience. And I wouldn't say that I felt super empowered in that particular relationship sexually. Then I had, kind of a flowering and awakening to my sexual fluidity shortly after he died, and realized, oh my gosh, I'm bisexual. I feel like my libido really woke up, and my interest in trying things and experimentation, kind of the stuff people usually do in their 20s, I started to do. And then I maintained a pattern of, as a friend of mine says, chemical bonding with people before I really knew who they were. And so getting into relationships that were actually more based on just sex, even though I wanted them to be love, and I made them into love. I did have a relationship that lasted a few years, but I would say from 33 to 47, I wasn't able to do the right things for myself. I wasn't able to hear my inner voice and obey it about people, about what I needed and wanted physically, emotionally. And then I started to really, because it was no different than any other addiction. I looked at that codependency and started to heal myself, and finally got clear on some baselines for myself. Like, I'm not willing to suffer anymore. And that had to come from all of that stuff that I went through in my 20s and 30s. Like, I would never have been in this incredible relationship, and nor would she have, had we not gone through just the ringer, and had to do some deep spiritual excavation and naming for ourselves what we deeply needed, and some things that are just like, they're so individual. I knew that I wanted, this is just a very minor thing, or maybe it's not. I knew I wanted a partner that wouldn't mind it if we communicated throughout a day. So online dating is hard. I have met some really wonderful people, but there's just like, I was in this very, very small group of people who, of a certain age, with a certain educational background, who were queer, who, like I had really just, though, moved away from men. I no longer felt that attraction cropping up at all in my daily life. And so I just started looking at women, but we live in a fairly small town. I would call it a town. And the pool is just infinitesimally small. So I expanded my search, and I really wasn't sure what my libido was at that point, 47, but I knew I wanted intimacy, and I just really felt like I was at a point where just practicing with no expectations, and maybe just using it as an excuse to check in with myself about things, like to really practice that, because I knew I had to get over the process of quickly deciding whether I liked someone or not, rather than letting it unfold a little bit, or at least I thought that would be possible. So I expanded my search to, I think it was like 200 miles away, and this person popped up, and this is my now partner, Sharon, and we started a texting communication and really hit it off. She's very funny, and we had a real like banter and rapport, and we are two women also, so you've got like double the emotional interest, I would say, and double the oxytocin and all that, as she's always saying. And so we met up in Richmond, which is halfway between where she lives in Norfolk and where I live in Charlottesville. And we had this amazing, perfect 8-hour date where we just walked around the city and got lost. We were so into each other. We're so engaged immediately, emotionally and physically, although she wasn't exactly what, type wise what I had dated previously. I was very attracted to her, and that was different. She identifies as a lesbian, and she was the first like lesbian that I had dated. I dated bisexual women and heterosexual men, but I hadn't dated someone who had only loved women. And so that was new as well. But the most powerful thing is that living 2.5 hours away from each other, we had to get real right away with what our baselines were with each other, because neither one of us wanted to waste our time driving 2.5 or 5 hours really to and fro for multiple dates, and not knowing where each other stood on things and what our backgrounds were and what our values were and all that. So we sat at this, I remember we like everything we'd planned to do evolved differently. We wound up in a hotel by VCU in the lobby having tea, and I asked her what she was looking for, and it was exactly what I was looking for. And I had my list in my journal of things I carried around to make sure I did not break that contract with myself. And it was just so powerful to have disclosed all that and had the other person say the same thing, and realize like we are at relatively the same stage in our development. She is younger than I am. She's 42 and I'm 49. So she's at she's barely Gen X, sort of on the cusp. Mm-hmm. But we're definitely very much in the same place, I would say, spiritually.
You just reframed the idea of a list, a relationship list, right? This is what I'm looking for in a relationship, or this is what I'm looking for in a career, or this is what I'm looking for in a home. Those types of lists, many people call them manifestation lists, right? Like you write down exactly what you want. And I really love the way that you have just reframed that, so that it's not, these are what I want so that they can appear out of thin air, but these are the things that I want. And I'm going to hold myself accountable by writing them down so I can look at the list and make sure that I'm honoring what I really value and need.
It really
And
was a matter of life and death for me. That's how it felt. I know that sounds dramatic, but it was like, I cannot go through what I have gone through in the past. I need this.
I'm noticing that with, and I'll be honest, I don't know if it's just that the women in my life are suddenly finding this, making demands that things get real, that we really see things as they are, that we honor our needs and intentions, that we hold each other accountable. There does seem to be a huge shift in that for my peer group. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I have had two supervisors who, both males, who, when someone who was, I'll say, over the age of 50 would get frustrated or angry or would make a complaint about something that I was working on, they would say something along the lines of, don't worry about her. She's just postmenopausal. I mean, she's just menopause. It's just that menopause madness, or it's just, I mean, really deeply uncomfortable, deeply disturbing kinds of comments that were made. And, I was much younger then. And I will say that there was part of me that was like, oh, whew, I don't have to worry about that. I'm admitting all of these, all of these ugly parts of myself that I'm not proud of these parts, but I think it's important to own them and name them because they are deeply internalized and they do shape how we see ourselves as we get older, right?
Yeah, well, they're boxes we've been put in, conditions, feelings about appearance. I almost feel like appearance is all, it's all the exterior.
But this is deeply interior, right?
Yeah.
This need to be very honest with ourselves and to demand authenticity. It's not just that, though. It's to be very discerning and to notice when something works or doesn't work. And to
discernment is all. And I think,
yeah.
And also, gosh, when do we stop listening to intuition? I don't know. It's something that women are supposed to be known for, but I know I heard it and disregarded it for so long. And all the answers are there. Like we know what we can handle and what we want. And it's just a matter of removing all the mufflers so we can hear this very clear, wise, something outside of our ego-bound lives.
That is exactly it. The challenge is listening and honoring always and letting go of expectations around that too.
And being willing to not know for a lot longer than it's comfortable for about anything. I avoided teaching for a really long time because I thought I had to be an expert. I thought I had to project complete confidence. Well, how do you get from A to B if you don't do it messily? You cannot prepare. Eventually, you have to get into the relationship to test all the things you've worked on. And you have to get into the classroom to test the things to begin to understand what it is to teach. You have to give birth to the baby, before you understand what it is to parent. Nobody can prepare you, and you can't figure out how to be perfect at it before you do it. And that is such to actually viscerally understand that it's taken me much longer than I would have thought.
Do it messy. Let's talk about sex.
So I had never felt safe enough in any relationship prior to dating Sharon to really explore and really risk. Shame is the right word, but just to be awkward and nervous, to ask for things, to try things. There were definitely things I wanted to try with a woman and never had in the past. And God, just both of us have we're very sex positive. We listen to Dan Savage all the time together. And it was just like, I could ask for everything I wanted. We realized each other's fantasies right away. And neither one of us had done that before. We immediately were like, oh my God, I would love it if, I asked Sharon to wear a dress a couple of times because she's not stereotypically feminine. She's she's sort of, I guess, in this interesting, she's got a real boy vibe going on, but also a very feminine face in some ways. So I was like, I want to see what this is when you dress up, which was really hot. And, similarly on the other side, I've helped her realize some fantasies, and it's just, I mean, for the first 2 weeks that we fell in love, we were so love drunk and sex drunk that we would literally like verbally play out scenarios all day long. Like, okay, what if we'd met at the DMV, and then we'd act out the scene. And then, she dyes my hair for me with the henna, and she'll pretend like she's never met me, and we'll have salon role play. And it was just like so different she's so game and so willing to try. And so am I. And I'd never been with someone at the same level with me. And so it's very joyful and very light but also hot. And yeah, I became just over the last year and a half, just so much more sexually responsive and free. And all relationships and sex within the relationship always change. You're never going to be where you are in the first 2 weeks usually. And as two women in a relationship, we spent more time together in the first 3 months than most people spend. Most heterosexual couples probably spend in a year dating, like immediately nonstop. It was the U-Haul, it's truly the U-Haul stereotype. But yeah, it's part of what I have really just, oh my God, it's been a game changer.
How has your relationship to your body changed, in that your body as a sexual?
Well, because I had all this joint stuff going on, it was sort of in and out of feeling embodied. There's been that going on because I was thinking of myself as a physical person, but then I became very limited in dealing with some chronic pain, which was very frustrating and could make me feel out of my body sometimes. But then I had hip surgery 6 weeks ago, and prior to that was in a lot of hip pain. And she just really has always been, we've always met each other as if in a sexual, like when we have a sexual experience, it doesn't matter what's going on with our bodies. I really think we could be almost paraplegic. And because sexuality and sensuality are really in the brain for a lot of us, then that's what matters. That's what's hot. And so it's actually been, it's funny. It's like my body hasn't been helping me too much over the part of almost all of our relationship. There's been something going on. She's been so loving and kind and never annoyed by it. And we've made accommodations, especially towards the end of my hip nightmare. And, it's very satisfying. It doesn't have to be, I don't have to feel like some sexy younger woman, when I'm with her.
You've just given me something to think about, because I'm recognizing now, here you go again, Jen, like pointing out like my biases that need my Bree's list of things to work on. Because I'm just recognizing how so much of my feeling sexy in my body revolves around feeling pain-free, really, feeling good, feeling limber, feeling flexible, energetic, and active, and yeah. And there's a part of me that feels like, oh, if you're not feeling that way, then you have to shut off the sexy part, the sensual part, the like.
Yeah.
So
it is sometimes hard. Really, it is sometimes hard to feel sexual when you're dealing with pain or just exhaustion.
But that there is possibility that I can also be curious around it, right? Like that's a big part of it is, let's get curious. If we're feeling held back by our bodies, what are some new discoveries that we can make so that we're not cutting off all physical pleasure just because all of our well-being is not fully available to us? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's funny having a child in the home who's been trapped with us now that she can drive, she's not trapped, but during the pandemic at first, it was hard. God, it would be so hard. Your mom's new girlfriend has moved in. So we try to be very respectful, but also take advantage every time she left the house to take advantage of that for sex. And but we had a pact. It wasn't like we were going to have sex if we really didn't want to. Like sometimes we would just watch a movie, but it definitely, it would cause us to like go there because we had a chance. And even if it started out a little like, I'm not feeling strong feeling in my body, it got there. And I guess it just showed me, it's sort of like you hear from writers, the journeyman type writers who are just like, I just get up and I write 3 pages every day. Doesn't matter if I'm inspired or not. It's kind of, I think, a little bit like sometimes we'll be watching a movie that happens to have a sex scene in it. And maybe I haven't been feeling sexual for the last 2 weeks, but something stirs in me from this sex scene in the movie. And we're like, we turn it off and take advantage. Turn off the movie.
That's so smart. It's so smart. And it's because it's practicing, right? And it's also getting out of your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Making room for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Thank you.
I think also it might be worth talking about, there is this trend in Gen X of women changing their sexual orientation, becoming more fluid in their 40s, like beyond childbearing years. It's like all of a sudden, if you're not happy in a relationship, heterosexual relationship, or you've always been bisexual but under the radar or whatever, there's just so many cases. I mean, they come out celebrity all the time, like Sarah Paulson is a great example, or gosh, so many. So there's so many cases. It's so many instances of it. And
if Jeff and if something happened to Jeff and if something happened to Jeff, there's no question I would not get in another relationship with a man.
I feel like it was such a gift to realize I was bisexual. It was like, or just to have it happen. I don't know if trauma brought it out. I've always wondered about that. I read this amazing book by Fionashaw's wife. She's an economist and was in a happy marriage with 2 sons, marriage to a man. She was in the Indonesian tsunami and lost her husband, her children, her parents, her best friend, and her best friend's parents. She was the only one who survived. She just somehow got holding onto a tree. And then years later, not that many years, like 9 years later, she's married to Fionashaw. Like, what happened there? I mean, clearly she was now in her 40s or maybe even 50 when that happened, because it could be hormonal, that starts to bend a little.
I mean, Glennondoyle, like there's so many
about their
people.
Relationship.
Me too. And it totally makes sense to me. It really does. But I can also say I've probably felt that way since I was in my 30s. I mean, Jeff is my partner, and I feel that on a level that is far beyond a sexual level, right? Like that relationship feels right to me, but I know that if something happened, that I wouldn't look for that kind of a relationship again in any way,
I'm interested in your experience as someone who's been married for that long, though, because I mean, things are going so well with me and Sharon, and they have from the beginning, which is another change. I've had a lot of tumultuous beginnings to relationships, and that in itself is a red flag. But I'm really curious about how it's going to play out over 20 years. What are you guys at, like 28 years or something?
Yeah. Well, we met when I was 19. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And yeah, it's intense, and it's this is what I was going to get to. That need, the wondering, am I going to get bored, or am I going to burn out? Those types of things. We find that those patterns play out in various aspects of our lives. And even just being aware of it can help us. And with addiction too.
Addiction to excitement too. Like there's that has been huge. Addiction to drama.
Yeah.
The dopamine, when it plummets and then gets rewarded.
Like that's what I want. What I really want is a little dopamine burst. So how can I get a little more dopamine? Like what's something, here are the steps that I can take. Like I know that dopamine is an anticipatory neuromodulator, right? That it's an expectation of a reward.
I got a dopamine rush from going with a friend who wanted to do the same thing and go to restaurants we've never been to across town, walk on streets we've never seen, go to events we've never heard of. And then sometimes, because we're both artists, like photograph each other in scenes there. And it's just, it's been one way to get some of that.
If you had one bit of advice for people who are going through perimenopause, who are in the muck of it right now, what would you like them to know or do? What would you wish?
I would wish for all of us to accept that we are always changing, and this is part of it, and not to look at it like in this big future cloud, like I'm about to go through a shitstorm, but like what's going on today? Because it's never the same day to day with menopausal symptoms, and it's never the same even before that, before we become perimenopausal. So yeah, just I hope for us all acceptance of the present, and that it's okay to try everything to figure out what's going on, like and especially reaching out to friends, reading. We are so much farther ahead now than our mothers were about this. I really think that we are hungry and thirsty, I guess you'd say, hungry and thirsty to debunk the stereotypes and the stigma, and it's happening.
We're very thirsty.
I don't lay any thirst traps anymore on Instagram though.
But if you wanted to.
Yeah, I could. That's true. I could. But for what? I've got what I want to slake my thirst.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving me the book.
You're welcome.
And I really mean it. I really mean it. Thank you for giving me the book. And thank you for being my friend. I cherish you and love you. I love you too. Even if we only see each other every year and a half, it's like so deep. And I just want you to know that.
I feel the same.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to the Pause to Go podcast. If you got something out of this episode, let us know. Share it with a friend, join our Facebook group, and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts if you loved it. If not, no worries. We want you to tell it like it is, and we'd love to have your input. If you want to know more about what I'm up to, you can follow me on Instagram at TheLovelyUnbecoming or at my website, TheLovelyUnbecoming.com. Stay curious, y'all.